Hello and welcome to my Modern Horizons 3 limited set review. Today I'll be going over the cards from the upcoming limited set, highly anticipated limited set. If you haven't been here before, you'll notice that I am in a different location this time. Um, but I am still committed to attempting to have a set review. Nonetheless, I am persevering. Um, Also, if you haven't been here before, let me get my camera out of the way. Hold on, so you can actually see the way I grade cards. It's a little bit different maybe than some people use. It's 5 tiers. Tier 1 is good. Tier 5 is bad. Feel free to read sort of what the cards mean. It's a little more loose. It's a lot more conversational here. That's the way we like to keep it. And we're gonna get right into reviewing the cards with Area Auxiliary. Um, so this is a 4 mana, 3 and a white for a 3/3 flying. When it enters the battlefield, you support 2. Um, so yeah, we've seen like in support 2, you put a +1/+1 counter on up to 2 target creatures. We've seen effects like this. We had Starling Supplier in the last set um, that perform above community expectations. My expectations have been high since the Warner Brothers War. The community didn't really like catch on. Like these are still like underrated type of cards, basically. Like these type of cards have been underrated consistently by the community at large for a good year and a half at this point, maybe even longer. Um, this one I think might finally catch people's attention because it's 4 mana. Typically these have been 5 mana. I mean, this is just a lot. There's a lot of stuff we're going on in this set with +1/+1 counters. This is a way to put counters on stuff. There's a lot of stuff that triggers off of counters being put on them. I know they have to like adapt and things of that nature. So this is I just see this as like an upgrade of a 5 mana version of this. Yes, obviously you need another creature for it to work. Yes, by itself it doesn't really do anything. It's just 4 mana 3/3 flyer, just horrendous. But I mean, this is a lot of power and toughness. It's going to enable good attacks on turn 4, even not even turn 5. It's so easy to imagine this just being good, just being yeah, a good card that you want to play consistently, right? Like it's just so easy to see um, this card performing well, and that's why I expect great things from it. To be honest, Ajani Fells the Gold God Shot side. Oh man, we're starting off hot. 3 white for a saga. So the first chapter you can exile a creature an opponent controls with power 3 or greater. Second chapter creates a 2/1 cat creature token and then put a vigilance counter on the creature you control. And the third chapter is target creature you control gains double strike until end of turn. Sagas naturally are good. They're just kind of like generally are good cards. They provide value over time. They generally provide you with more, than what your mana is worth. This specifically looks, kind of like Elspeth Conquers Death in a way. Like most of the permanents that, like the creatures that matter that you would actually want to kill with this type of effect, are going to have power 3 or greater. You're not going to have stat many misses. Um, Making a 2/1 and then putting a vigilance counter on it is great. You have like 2 turns to put like something in play that works with a double strike. It just does a lot of good stuff. I really like it. You can't like load up on tons of these, but it's an enchantment. You can like pick it up. There's like ways to like pick these up. You can like remove multiple things and get like value or whatever. All kinds of interesting little synergies with the fact that it's a saga and an enchantment. Um, so yeah, just seems really strong to me. Just a nice way to remove stuff. A Johnny Nakatl Pariah. I should have put this in tier 1. Maybe we'll see about that in a second. It's a 1 and a white for a cat warrior. When it enters the battlefield, you create a 2/1 cat warrior. When one or other cats you control die, you may exile it and return it to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control. Um, and it becomes a planeswalker. There's a bunch of these flip planeswalkers. Um, the planeswalker side, so it has a +2 to put a +1/+1 counter on each cat you control. It has a 0 to make a 2/1 cat. And then if you control a red permanent other than this, it deals damage equal to the creature you control at any target. So that's like sweet, but like not necessary. And then -4 for each opponent. Choose an artifact, creature, and enchantment of the planeswalker from 1 on it from its control, and then they sacrifice the rest. If like that's how it works. Um, Most of the way you want to evaluate this is as a 2 mana 3/3. I am actually probably gonna put this back up into tier one. It's just so efficient. Hold on, one moment. Yeah, so if I've moved it back to tier one, and the reason I had it lower is that I start by grading the white cards, and like I had expectations, you know what I mean? It's MH3, and like all of these cards are going to be so busted, all whatever. This isn't even going to be that great. But no, the cards aren't like that out of left field that this isn't a tier one card. This is a tier one card. This card's really sick. Um, yes, your opponent can just kill it, but you're still getting a 2-for-1 if they just kill your like 2-drop, and then you still get a 2/1 in play. It's easy to have this and then like be able to have like sack outlets and stuff. There's some free sack outlets in the set. It's just going to be really hard to come out ahead of this if you're the opponent, right? It's just going to be if this ever flips, it's a disaster. If you're playing red, I mean, yeah, like I don't know, just makes a 2/1 every turn, pretty good. Like I don't tell you. So yeah, this card's great. I just my main concern was kind of just like, oh, it's an MH3 set. Do I really care that much about a 2 mana 3/3 over two bodies? And the answer is yes, you do. Uh, Angel of the Ruins, 5 white for a 5/7 with flying. When it enters the battlefield, exile 2 target artifacts and or enchantments. And there's plane cycling for 2 colorless mana. I think this is the only of the land cyclers in this set. I don't really know why they're not doing like a cycle of them. It's kind of weird. But this ticks a lot of boxes for me, which is why it's in tier three and not tier four. So plane cycling, we've seen that 2 mana cycling tends to be a little expensive. Like you don't really want it. You kind of have to want all of the rest of what this card's doing. So this card is an artifact, which is maybe more downside than upside. It does exile 2 artifact or enchantments when it enters the battlefield, which again is probably pretty relevant. It is the real key is that it's 7 mana. Like just being 7 mana has like inherent value in this set. I'm not sure how much that's true with white specifically. So actually, I'm gonna do another grade adjustment here. We're doing all the grade adjustments today. So as you can see, I've adjusted it. I just think it's too like talking it over. That's kind of why we do the reviews, right? Is to be able to talk over these cards and figure out how I actually feel about them. And at the end of the day, I just think that the being 7 mana thing doesn't really matter that much in white. Like if this were blue or green, I think that it would get a little bit better. But just being white doesn't excite me. And plane cycling is like one of the worst ones. Like if you were gonna make this a color, white is probably the worst. Like red and black care more about artifacts, blue and green care more about big spells. So I just don't really see where this fits in, to be honest. The card seems like fine, but I'm just not excited about it. Argent Dais. One away for an artifact that enters the battlefield with 2 oil counters on it. Whenever 2 or more creatures attack, you put an oil counter on Argent Dais. You can pay 2 and tap it to remove 2 oil counters from Argent Dais, and you exile another target on permanent. Its controller draws 2 cards. So this is kind of a weird one to parse. So here's kind of like the things that happen with this card. If you attack with 2 creatures, or your opponent attacks with 2 creatures, you put an oil counter. So that's it. So you can get like more than one in a turn cycle. It is possible. It can be done. It starts with 2 on it, which means you can immediately use the ability, right? So you can exile non-land permanents before it draws 2 cards. Generally, what you're going to want to do with that is you like take one of your tokens and turn it into 2 cards. It's not bad. I mean, you're paying 4 mana to sacrifice something to turn it into 2 cards. But if your opponent has something absurd, you can kill it. And it does exile. It's not good. Like, it's not good to, like, 3-for-1 yourself to do that. But, like, it is it is a thing that is nice to be able to do. Like, it's not good. Like, you never want to cast Force Will, but it's a nice thing to be able to do sometimes. Like, this card, I don't think it's good. I do think there's like some weird niche, like, oh, what if I had like was doing token stuff and this was like kind of like a thing and whatever. I don't think this is good at all. I think it's too slow. Um, but there is like some kind of cool stuff you can do with this card, which I do like about the card. Charitable Levy, 1 and a white for an enchantment. Non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast. Whenever a player casts a non-creature spell, put a collection counter on Charitable Levy. Then, if there are 3 or more collection counters on it, sacrifice it. If you do draw a card, then you put it. Search your library for a Plains card, put that onto the battlefield, tap, and then shuffle. So this is like a riff on land tax, right? It's kind of the joke. Sort of. It's kind of a land tax. Anyways, the thing about this card is there's so many creatures in limited, even in this set, which is there's a heavier artifact theme and whatnot. There's still so many creatures that this is just not going to trigger enough for it to be good. And it honestly, like, if you were trying to trigger it, that's bad because then you have to pay more for your spells. So yeah, just not really good on either end of this card. Decree of Justice. XX 2 white for a sorcery. You create X 4 white angel creature tokens with flying, and you can cycle it for 2 and a white. When you cycle the Decree of Justice, you may pay X. If you do create X 1 white soldier creature tokens. So, I mean, like Decree of Justice is a reprint. It's a pre-modern staple and whatnot, but in modern limited, this is just too expensive, right? Like I can't. You have to pay 6 mana to make 1 4/4 angel, right? So that's the front side of the card. Obviously, the real front side of the card is that you are cycling it for, so it's like 4 mana, make a 1/1 draw card. 5 mana, make 2 1/1s, draw a card. Not excited about. You have to get to like 7 or 8 mana before this starts becoming like something that I'm like kind of reasonably interested in. And there's just so many better things you could do with it, like with other cards. If 8 mana for 2 4/4 angels is not even like a good deal, really. So you kind of really gotta want it, and this I just don't think you want it that much in this format. Distinguished Conjurer, 1 and a white for a 1/2. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. And you can pay 4 and a white and tap and exile a target creature you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. It's really small, weak 2-drop, marginal upside, not exciting. It is a 2-drop that does gain you life when your creatures enter the battlefield, kind of a thing. It triggers ETBs sometimes, kind of a thing. It does protect your stuff, like if you have 5 mana lying around, like you could protect something maybe. That's saving it from being tier 5, but it's pretty dang close to being tier 5. Dog Umbra. 1 and a white for an enchantment with flash. It's an aura. As long as another player controls enchanted creature, it can't attack or block. Otherwise, Dog Umbra has Umbra armor, which means that if the creature would die, this aura would be removed. So this is like a really weird pacifism. Pacifism is bad. They never printed flash pacifism, mostly because it doesn't really improve the card that much. Like it obviously makes it better. It's just kind of like, it can't attack. Like, I don't know. You go also, it's like a flash protection spell that's also a thing that can remove something. And that's saving it from being tier 4, but I'm not excited about this card. I think it's just going to be fine, and that's okay. Envoy of the Ancestors. 2 and a white for 2/3 with Outlast for a single white, and modified creatures you control have lifelink. So there's actually a considerable number of like +1/+1 counter and like modified creature themes in this set. Lifelink, as we know, is good. This card concerns me. I think it might actually be worse than this. I don't love it. It starts off as a 3-mana 2/3, and you're on turn 4. You have to tap it to and not attack or block. I think the part of this card that's actually good is the like modified creatures you control have lifelink part, because there's going to be a lot of modified creatures just running around in this format. So I do think that is something. Like, you could play this and then play the like Griffin thing on turn 4 and then give it a +1/+1 counter, and then it has lifelink, and then like you're kind of off to the races there. So I think that's kind of the part of the card that I like, and the Outlast is more like upside or just kind of like a thing that you can do sometimes, rarely, but it does. Anything that has lifelink, interested in. I'm always interested. I'm always thinking, ooh, lifelink, gain some life, draw, keep you alive, all that good stuff. Essence Reliquary. 2 and a white for an artifact. You can tap it to return another target permanent you control and all auras you control attached to it to their owner's hand. It activate only during your turn. So this card, I want to be very clear about what this card does by itself, and the answer is literal nothing. And so I originally had this in tier 5. I have moved it up because there's a lot of weird finicky stuff you could do in this set where ooh, I got that, that saga from earlier. I could bounce that back to my hand and remove, another one of their things. Or, like whatever. You can protect your creatures during combat, you don't get blown out, and all there's it's kind of doing a bunch of weird cool stuff that's sweet but probably isn't very good. And that's why I have it in tier 4. I don't think it's strong in a lot of scenarios, but I can see, there's a lot going on. The concern is just it's too slow. It is an artifact. There are ways to remove artifacts, a lot of them, and this is something that can definitely just get removed and do nothing. Spell the Unworthy. 1 and a white for a sorcery with kicker for 2 and a white. Choose target creature with mana value 3 or less. If the spell was kicked, instead choose target creature, exile the chosen creature, then its controller gains life equal to its mana value. So this card's really fascinating because it shows how it shows Wizards of the Coast distance away from thinking Swords to Plowshares is a reasonable card to put in limited, because they could have just obviously they don't want Swords in Modern. It would be one of the best cards in Modern if you put Swords to Plowshares in Modern. So obviously they don't want that, but I'm kind of surprised they didn't just print 2 mana sorcery speed Swords to Plowshares. Would that have been too much? This is kind of like that in a lot of cases, because you're killing something mana value 3 or less, and that's why I have it in tier 3. Exile's good. You can kill big stuff. Sorcery speed removal is just not super priority. Although again, Exile's nice. 2 mana. It is 2 mana to remove stuff that you want to kill for 2 mana, and you have the option in the late game to remove something bigger. And I think that's just fine. Not exciting, but fine and playable. Whatever. The opponent gaining life thing basically doesn't matter. Don't worry about that. It's just not. It's just not something that matters in most scenarios. Flare of Fortitude. 2 white for an instant. You may sacrifice a non-token white creature rather than pay the spell's mana cost. Until end of turn, your life total can't change, and permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible. This is one of those just don't play this. This is like a fog, essentially, that is free, but you have to sacrifice something, which is worse than you're never paying 4 mana for this, and you're just not going to want to sacrifice your creatures to pay for these flares. There's some of the flares, like the blue one, where it's a counter spell. You're like, oh, I could foresee myself being like, I'll sacrifice my 3-drop and counter your spell. So I'm sure. I really don't want that spell to resolve. That may happen more often than it should, but this card basically just shouldn't ever be cast in limited. I think it's really bad. Glyph Elemental. 1 and a white for 2/2 with bestow for 1 and a white. It has landfall, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Glyph Elemental. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 counter for each +1/+1 counter on Glyph Elemental. So essentially, you can bestow this and put it on one of your creatures, and that creature will continue to grow. And when that creature dies, this thing becomes a creature with a bunch of counters on it, which is sweet. That's really good. This is one of the cards you should just play this on 2. If you have this in your hand, you don't have another 2-drop, just jam it on turn 2. Your opponent basically has to kill it. It's attacking as a 3/3 on turn 3. That's really big, and it's just going to be an enormous pain to deal with. It's just going to be really hard to get around this thing. This thing looks kind of like evolving adaptive in some ways. It's got even more upside. I might tier 2 might even be too low on this card. It's really strong and flexible and good at all phases of the game. So I really like it. Guardian of the Forgotten. 3 and a white for a 4/4 with vigilance. When a modified creature you control dies, manifest the top card of your library. So manifesting is like you put the card on the battlefield as a 2/2, and then you can flip it. If it's a creature, it's like it's morph kind of. It's just it's just morph. It's kind of just like morph. Again, there's a lot of modification going on in this format. 4 mana 4/4 vigilance is just not the most exciting thing in MH3 context. Like it's fine, but it's not amazing. This card looks totally fine, but not amazing. Guide of Souls, single white mana for a 1/2. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life and get an energy. So just note that this triggers on any number of creatures. So if you have a thing that makes 2 creatures on ETB, this gets 2 energy and 2 life. I mean that's crazy. First of all, and then like the second ability is whenever you attack, you may pay 3 energy, and when you do put 2+1/+1 counters and a flying counter on a target attacking creature, it becomes an angel. I mean, this just looks completely absurd. Like, let's just kind of think about the scenarios. First of all, one thing to note about this card is there's tons of ways to get energy in this set. Like, having looked over the set, like there's just tons of ways to make energy. So that's not going to be a problem. You can play this on like turn 4 and just attack with your 3-drop and then pay 3 energy that you just have had from earlier turns and just make it into like a flyer. Like, it's huge. It's just an enormous, like, it's just super large. And then you could just also play it on 1 and you know not on turn 2 but on turn 3 like this or something else is going to be attacking in some cases as 3/4 flying something else. Like it's just your opponent basically has to kill this thing immediately or they lose. Like it's just so much threatening this year. Hexgold Slip. 1 and a white for a 2/1. When it enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy counters. When it attacks, you may pay 2 energy. If you do, it gains first strike until end of turn. And when it deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So the reason this isn't higher is we've kind of seen this sort of effect before, where it's like, oh man, my 2-drop is really good on the play and useless on the draw. Like this is one of the cards that it is essentially useless on the draw. Like you're just never really going to be able to attack. Like your opponent's going to be able to have something with 3 toughness on turn. Like by the time this gets to attack, if you're on the draw, and that makes it considerably worse. When you're on the play, it's really good. So that's kind of how I feel about this card. It does gain 2 energy when it ETBs, which is nice. It does grow over the course of the game if your opponent misses their 2 or 3 drop. That's nice. It's an aggressive card. Nothing special. On to the next one. Indebted Spirit. Single white mana for a 1/1 with Bestow for 2 and a white. It has Afterlife 1. And the enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has Afterlife 1. So yeah, this is obviously sweet. It's a 1-drop that you can just play. It's Doom Traveler. Doom Traveler's a good card. Although the one in the last set, the Nezumi Linkbreaker, that is Doom, like, well, not obviously not as good as Doom Traveler. Making a 1/1 flyer is better than making a Mercenary, but the Mercenaries were pretty good. That card was not amazing, so I don't expect this as just a 1-drop to be super amazing, but you can play it that way, and I think you should in a lot of cases, depending on your deck too. But yeah, the Bestow is really nice. Making something, +1/+1 and have Afterlife 1, that's pretty good. And then this falls off, and like it also has Afterlife 1, so you're making like a total of like 3 tokens with this for 3 mana, and like whatever. The note with Bestow is you do have to make sure you're not getting blown out. You don't want to be doing bestowing into open mana. It's kind of a disaster if they remove your thing. It's just yeah. It's a disaster. I know it's templated as if like it becomes a creature again if it's not attached, but no, the spell just doesn't resolve if they remove the creature because it fizzles. So like I know it kind of like it looks like oh it would just fall off and become a creature if you cast it for the bestow. That's not how I don't think that's how it works. That's my understanding of how it works. That may be slightly incorrect, but I'm pretty sure that it does not work the way you want it to. Inspired Inventor, 2 and a white for a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, you choose one. You can get 3 energy counters. You can put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, or you can create a 1/1 artifact servo. Really nice card. Solid, 3-drop, really good. Does all the stuff you want. All of these modes are useful and will come up. and that's it. Like it's just really flexible card. It is the thing that is dinging it. The reason it's tier 3 and not higher is that it is a 3-drop, and 3-drops are just not as important as 2-drops, or even, you know what I mean. Like that's kind of it. That's why it's here. It's a strong card. You're going to want to play it in every deck pretty much, but just not super exciting. Jolted Awake. Single white mana for a sorcery. Choose up to one target artifact or creature card in your graveyard. You get 2 energy. Then you may pay an amount of energy equal to that card's mana value. If you do, return it from your graveyard to the battlefield. You can cycle it for 2. So, obviously, this looks a lot like Unearth. Unearth's a good card. The nice thing is you have cycling. Like when you just don't have something to get back, cycling is great. And there are so many ways to like make this broken. Like it obviously needs work, right? You're not on like turn 3 going to be able to like reanimate something huge. It just isn't really in the cards. There's just not really like a conceivable way to get there with the cards available in this set. But I mean, there are ways that things can work out. And the cycling just sort of helps too. You're like on turn 2, if you have this in your opener and you're just like doing nothing, and it's like you could just cycle it, and it's not great, but you are at least doing something. This thing does gain energy by itself. I like it. I like it, but I don't love it. Just continuing with these mandibular kite, because mandibles. I don't know. Single white mana for a living weapon equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has flying, and is equipped for 3 and a white. Yep, I mean, this is super solid. Good 1-drop. It's an artifact. It's a creature. It's a token. It has, it leaves 2 objects in play. You get to, make your other stuff have flying in late game, and that's great, but not super exciting. Metastatic Evangel. 1 and a white for the 3/1. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, proliferate. So as you've seen sort of throughout this, one of White's like sub themes is that it cares about counters. This 2-drop seems very good, right? It's just a 2-mana 3/1. 2-mana 3/1s are good. They don't print a ton of them. I've actually noticed that recently in recent sets they've actually been printing fewer 2-mana 3/1s than they used to. It used to be green would get 1, white would get 1, and red would get 1 in most sets. Now it's like white gets 1 sometimes, and red and green don't get them as often. So maybe it's just like a little trend here, but there is inherent power in the 3/1 stat line, and we've sort of seen that be the case. And so they don't print as many of them. At least that's my impression. And I think that proliferating is going to come up a significant amount, but not enough to bump this from tier 3 up into tier 2. I still think it's going to be a good 2-drop. It's a 2-drop. It's high priority because it's a 2-drop. The text on it is not amazing or super relevant. Muster the Departed. 2-mana white for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. At the beginning of your end step, if creatures at this turn populate. So, obviously this card has problems, right? If your opponent kills your 1/1 flyer, you don't have anything to populate, right? That's bad. If nothing dies, it's just a 3-mana 1/1 flyer. That's really bad. All those things. I just see the upside on this card, and I'm like, man, there's so like this because again, if you make 1 flyer with this, it's just gravy from there. Because 3 mana for 2 1/1 flyers is a good deal. It's a great deal. And this card kind of looks like my Bat Colony, my beloved, right? Like this card, looks kind of like that card, and I love Bat Colony a lot more than most. I thought Bat Colony was sweet in the Caves deck, but this card, I'm looking. I'm making some, whatever. There are a bunch of other tokens in white. There's a bunch of token creatures, so I think this isn't just completely dead if they kill your 1/1 flyer. They kind of have to just kill all your tokens for the rest of the game, and like you can have ways to sacrifice things, whatever. So I like this. It's not good in every deck. Obviously, there's a lot of like, there's going to be some decks, a considerable number of decks where this is terrible. But you know, on turn two, if you play a 2-drop and attack and trade with their 2-drop and play this on 3, you're in a pretty good spot because like if you're like your opponent's staring at 2/1/1 flyers and they're like, well, I have to get rid of these or like like they have a way to sacrifice one of these, it's just going to go infinite. So it becomes definitely becomes very interesting. I like it a lot. I don't think it's going to be generically good, but I really do think that the ceiling on this card makes it good enough. Nyx Born Unicorn. 1 and a white for a 2/2 with Bestow for 3 and a white. It has Mentor, and the equipped creature, enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and has Mentor. So Mentor makes your other attacking creatures, one of your other attacking creatures larger if it has smaller power. Yeah, it's another solid 2-drop that you can play in the late game as a Bestow creature. This one it's a lot less good to play on 2, but you're probably still supposed to just jam it if you're playing white. Like it's an enchantment, so it just kind of like die. I don't know. I do think you're supposed to just jam this on 2 most of the time and not be like super happy about it. But yeah, there's just a lot of solid 2-drops, and there's better ones than this. Ocelot Pride. 1 white mana for a 1/1 with first strike and lifelink. It has Ascend. At the beginning of your end step, if you gain life this turn, create a 1/1 cat creature token. Then, if you have the city's blessing for each token you control, it's a enter the battlefield this turn, create a token. It's a copy of it. So yeah, I mean, this is just a really powerful 1-drop, right? You have 2 keywords on your 1-drop. If it attacks and doesn't die, it's going to make another 1/1. And if you gain life, there's other ways to gain life. I mean, it just seems sweet. Like I can't really imagine. I mean, I don't think it's quite as good as the other 1-drop we saw, the rare. I don't think it's quite that good. I do think it's insanely good though. So I put it in tier 1 because I don't think there's a whole lot of value in distinguishing between those two cards. Orm's Chant. Single white mana for an instant with kicker for a white mana. Target player can't cast spells this turn if the spell was kicked. Creatures can't attack this turn. So it's not for limited. Obviously, it's too situational, and it's again kind of like a fog that doesn't actually like do anything. Yes, on your opponent's upkeep, you can cast this and like not even really time walk them because they still have their creatures in play and can still play a land, so they still draw a card. Like it just isn't. It's just not where you want to be. Pearl Ear Imperial Advisor. 1 white for a 3/4 with lifelink. Enchantment spells you cast have affinity for auras. And whenever you cast an aura spell that targets a modified permanent you control, draw a card. So this is really sweet, right? Obviously the base stats, 3 mana, 3/4 lifelink, it is double pipped, and that is the reason because it's double pipped, it is being moved down an entire tier, right? I mean, if it was 2 and a white for a 3/4, it would be in tier 1. It is 1 white for a 3/4, so it is in tier 2. I mean, we've kind of just seen that like big lifelink is good. There is a lot of bestow and other enchantment stuff, so we're gonna find ways to use this. And again, there's modified creatures going to be everywhere, so you should be able to draw cards with this pretty consistently. Does die to removal, but that's fine. It's just big. It's just a large thing. It is hard to cast, harder to cast than you'd like, but still going to be very good. Still going to be a high priority. You just kind of got to make sure your mana's decent. Felia Exuberant Shepherd. 1 and a white for a 2/2 with flash. When it attacks, exile up to one other target non-land permanent. At the beginning of the next end step, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. If it enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Felia. So, it can blink your opponent's stuff to get it out of the way to attack, right? It can blink your stuff to retrigger your ETBs if you have them. That's flash. It's a 2-drop. It really just ticks all the boxes for tier 1 card. It's a card you can pick early in the draft. It's a card that attacks really well and generates value well. So it does both, sort of works on both ends of the spectrum there. And it's just really solid. Like I can't really, and retriggering ATBs, there's tons of stuff. It's not permanent, so you can exile your Saga again, or your Artifact, or whatever. Anything that has an ETB, and bring it back, and it's going to do some sweet stuff. Proud Pack Rhino. Turn away for a 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, choose one. You put a shield counter on target permanent, and you can proliferate. So this is sweet. Obviously, shield counters are always really, really good. Um, just like how good is I'm basically evaluating this card as, man, this is a 3-mana 3/3 with a shield counter on it. It's a pretty dang good card. Like that's not easy to deal with. Like, it's not an easy thing to deal with a 3/3 with a shield counter on it. And sometimes it doesn't put a shield counter on something, and that means that it's proliferating, which means that it's doing something better than putting a shield counter on it, which is really strong. If you have ways to blink it, you can put shield counters on multiple things. You can proliferate multiple times. You can whatever. There's all kinds of cool stuff that you can do with this card. Looks like a really solid 3-drop to me. So we have our first MDFC. It's called Razorgrass Ambush. It is an instant. It deals 3 damage to 1 and away for an instant. It deals 3 damage to target attacking or blocking creature, and it's a land that you can pay 3 or it enters the battlefield tapped. Yep, removal on these. This is like the perfect, all basically I have 2 tiers for these MDFCs. The ones that are like this, that are interaction or some type of spell that I really like, on the front gets into tier 2. The ones that the spells are basically terrible, I put in tier 3. And that's kind of it. That's my grading criteria for those cards. Recruiter of the Guard, 2 mana white for a 1 moment, and enters the battlefield. You may search your library for a creature card with toughness 2 or less, reveal it, put it in your hand, and then shuffle. This is more like a 3 mana 1/1 draw card than you may think. Again, there's like some minor blinky synergy stuff going on, but for the most part, it's kind of just finding a small creature. It is really weak by itself. Like the 3 mana 1/1 is just not good. You have good stuff to tutor with it. It becomes okay. And that's kind of where I've rated it. Is I'm like, well, you're probably going to have 1 or 2 things that are pretty good to tutor with it. If you have those, it becomes okay. Whatever. It's drawing a card. It's a 3 mana 1/1 that draws a card. Not great. There's blink capabilities, but again, not super relevant. I think it's just okay, basically. It's kind of how I feel about Recruiter of the Guard. It's going to get way overdrafted. Don't ever draft this back with everyone. That is a bad idea. Roscoe Knight. 4 and a white for a 3/4 with Vigilance. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal an artifact or enchantment card from one and put it in your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in random order. If you didn't put a card in your hand, this way put a +1/+1 counter on the knight. So I think that it's actually pretty achievable to have a deck where you're hitting, 80, 90% of the time with this in this set. There's tons of artifacts and enchantments. There's just tons of them. So I do think it's achievable to do this. You only need like what? So you're looking at the top 6. That's um, quick math. Like, so you need like 6 or 7 things for this to trigger the high rate. Yeah, I mean, I think that's achievable. If you have those numbers of things, like I think that's achievable. And whatever. Even if you miss, it's not a disaster. 5 mana 4/5 vigilance isn't great, but it's not like a terrible card. It's gonna lose you the game on the spot if you brick. So don't hate it. Sevinne's Reclamation. 2 and white for a sorcery. Return target permanent card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. If the spell was cast from your graveyard, you may copy the spell and you may choose a new target for the copy. And you can flash it back for 4 and white. So this card has been in Vintage Cube. It is a card that exists in, it's a commander card, I think, originally. And it's being printed into this set. And it's very good in Vintage Cube. Like, it's a great value card because you get your 3-drop back, and then you get 2 3-drops back for 5 mana, which is great. So you're basically getting a 3-for-1 with this card. It's flexible. It triggers ETBs. You can discard it or mill it or whatever, and still getting value because of the flashback. There's just all kinds of small things that are great with this card. I don't have it in tier 1 just because it is like a card that needs help and it doesn't work by itself, but I think it's just going to be consistent enough that you're going to be very happy with it. And your deck a high percentage of the time. Solstice Zealot. 2 mana white for a 2/3. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 2 energy, and you can pay an energy to tap target creature. So paying the energy here is pretty bad. Like, this is just not. There are good and bad ways to use energy in this set. This is not one of the best ways to use energy. It's nice that you can have a way to use it when you have a ton and don't have one of your other uses. But it's really hard for me to grade an energy card this low. Like a 3-mana 2/3 that gives you 2 energy. Like that card, and genuinely, that card might just be good. Like that card might just be better than tier 4 by itself. And so that's where I'd be wrong here. But I just have a really hard time with this. Like, I think this is so much worse than a 2-mana tapper. I understand that it costs energy, so it's free, so you can do it for 0. And if you just have a bunch of energy, it's like, oh, it's a removal spell kind of. It's like, well, no, but it isn't. You get 2 turns of tapping something down. You can't even do it immediately. It just seems to like too much work. I think there's so many better ways to be doing stuff with energy than this card. Static Prison. Now here's another interesting one. Single white mana for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent and opponent controls until it leaves the battlefield. You get 2 energy. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, sacrifice Static Prison unless you pay an energy. So you get to take their thing away for 3 turns, right? The worst case scenario is you remove their thing, pay an energy. So you have it off the battlefield that turn, the next turn, and the next turn. So you get 3 turns of the thing being gone for 1 mana. It hits anything, any non-land permanent. 3 turns is a lot of time. 3 is like a long, long time. If you honestly if you're not generating more energy in 3 turns, like I don't know what is going on. The problem, so this is the problem with this card and some other cards is that it makes your other energy payoffs like almost unusable. So like it's kind of in this weird space where like if you have a card, like if you're a deck and you're like, man, my goal of this deck is to turn this repeatable energy user, like to use this energy to like consume energy many times during the game to do this like very powerful stuff. This card does not do that, and it actually actively prevents you from doing that. But it's so powerful on its face, and it doesn't need much help, right? If your deck is like, well, I have a couple things that make energy, and like maybe a couple things that use energy, this card is probably like it's probably good. Like I have a really hard time with this effect because it seems like it's not enough, right? Like when I look at the card, I'm like, that's so unappealing. But I'm like, that is a long. So like 3 turns is a long time. I know it's 1 mana, but you're never going to cast it on turn 1. You're going to be casting it on like turn 4 or 5. It's an enchantment. There are synergies with that. You could, in theory, like pick it up and replay it and regain the energy if their thing doesn't have like an ETB or something. Like there's and like you can still get like there's still the best case scenario of this is 1 mana, remove their token, you get 2 energy. Like that's just unreal, and that's going to happen some percentage of the time. You can even just like this. It's so flexible in the amount of time and the amount of resources that you use that I think I'm inclined to grade it high, and we'll see how it pans out. Thraben Charm. 1 white for an instant. It deals damage equal to twice the number of creatures you control the target creature. You can destroy target enchantment, or you can exile any number of target players' graveyards. It's a nice little flexible spell. Notably, this dealing twice the number of creatures you have is really strong because it's a 2 mana deal for a very high percentage of the time. We've seen 2 mana deal 4s consistently be very, very good and limited. I don't see why this would be any different. Sometimes it can, like, this thing scaling with the game seems great. It destroys enchantments. Like, this just seems really good to me. Look, this card, you know what this card really looks like? It looks like Destroy Evil. This card looks a lot like Destroy Evil. Yes, obviously you need to have a board presence, but like newsflash, it's really good to have a board presence in limited. So like you already want to be doing that. Another interesting one. Voltstorm Angel, 3 white, white for 4 4 with flying. When it enters the battlefield, you get 3 energy. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may pay 2 energy. If you do, choose 1. This gains vigilance and lifelink until end of turn. Or other creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. So, on turn 5, you could say, alright, play this before combat, make my creatures pump my team, get in for a bunch, maybe. Or, you just play it as a 5-mana 4/4 that gives you 3 energy, it has flying. And then, like, if it looks like you can get in, you're like, alright, I'll just give this vigilance and lifelink, and man, like, you connect once with your 4/4 flying lifelink, you're pretty ahead, probably. Like, you're in a pretty good spot, like, it blocks too. So, I don't want to give a 5-drop that's double pipped this high of a grade, but it kind of ticks a lot of boxes. Makes energy, uses energy well. It does have an ETB effect, a pseudo ETB effect, and I just like it a lot. It just seems like a really solid threat to me. White Orchid Phantom, white white for 2/2 with flying and first strike. When it enters the battlefield, destroy up to 1 target non-basic land. Its controller may search the library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. So obviously the second ability is not super limited relevant. There is going to be a significant number of non-basics in this format, but your opponent you're not going to generally cut your opponent off of a color of mana, which is kind of the way that you want to use this. Really what you're looking at is, white white for a 2/2 flying first strike. How good is that? Well, obviously if it was a 1 and a white, I would put it in tier 1. 2/2 flying first strike is excellent. Again, when it's double pip like this, you bump it down to full tier. It's possible I should even be bumping this down to tier 3. That's how much the double pip hurts. But I think that the upside of being like, well, sometimes on turn 2 you're going to be able to cast it, and you're going to be pretty far ahead when you do. Like, you've got a 2/2 flying first strike. That's pretty big. And sometimes you will be able to, turn off your opponent's dual land. It does thin their deck. You could thin your own deck if you want, kind of a thing. If you're like, oh, really want to thin my own deck, get really creative with it. But yeah, I think this is just a solid card. It's a really hard card to take early in a draft. You kind of really want to already be mono white. This is not like a card that I'm like thrilled to pack and pick one, but you could do it. Be like super sad about it. Wing it. 1 and a white for an instant. Target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Put a flying counter on it and scry 1. Wow. Now this is a combat trick. We had the era of dead combat tricks in OTJ, and we're back to having the +2/+2 combat trick in white. This card's just really sweet, right? You can use it before attack, so your opponent can't block. You can use it post combat, and then your thing's going to have flying. You can scry 1 because you want to get value, and that's really nice. There's just all kinds of good stuff. That does everything right. It's a really strong combat trick. It's in tier 3 because, again, combat tricks, there's actually not that many of them, so they don't have as many diminishing returns. This one is just so strong, and maybe I should put it in tier 2. I have done that in the past. I don't know if this is better or worse than Auspicious Arrival. It's like somewhere in that neighborhood. So, Witch Enchanter, another MDFC that has 3 and a white for a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, destroy target artifact or enchantment your opponent controls, which again I said there's going to be probably plenty of, and I think that's the case. And there's Witch Blast Meta, which is the plan you can pay 3 life to not enter tapped. Yeah, these are good. I think there's going to be tons of artifacts and enchantments running around. This one is more of a land than a spell. But the spell is really nice to have access to if you need it. If you want the spell, you're going to be really happy to have it. If you want the land, you're going to want the land. So it's really powerful to be able to have access to both. And the last white card, Wrath of the Skies. X white white. For a sorcery, you get X energy. Then you would pay any amount of energy. Destroy each artifact, creature, and enchantment with mana value less than or equal to the amount of energy paid this way. So this card looks actually completely unbeatable for several reasons. One of which is that it's a modular wrath. Modular wraths tend to be very good because they enable you to pay the amount that you need and not more. It allows you to be efficient, right? This also hits artifacts and enchantments. This also gains you energy. you can just use energy. Like the thing with this card that's crazy is, on turn 5 or 6, you could have like 4 energy in your bank. Say, okay, I'm gonna play this for 2 mana, use 4 energy, wipe your board, and then I'm gonna play like a 3 drop, and it's like, well, that was a complete disaster. So yeah, I think this is just really sick. Um, this is like, even if you think of this as like, well, this is farewell, right? I'm gonna pay 4 mana, exile all the stuff that's less than 4 mana value less, like artifacts, creatures, whatever. Obviously, it's not as modular as farewell and whatnot, but I think it's just super good. I think this wrath is very good. And that's it. That's all the white cards. I hope this video is watchable, given that I'm recording it from not my usual setup. I'm looking forward to MX3. I'm really excited, and there will be more set reviews to come if this thing is successfully able to be uploaded. And I will see you next time.